Thank you, President and tribal leaders and students for coming and taking your time to hang out. Maybe you have to come here, so I don't know. But if you volunteered, thanks for volunteering to come and hang out a few minutes. My father is Ogallala from Pine Ridge, and my mom is Sichangu from Rosebud. And so typically not the most positive way. So my mom left Rosebud back in the day, went to Pine Ridge, met my dad. They got married. I was conceived. They got divorced. My mom moved back to Rosebud. And so I was born among my mother's people. And I never grew up around Pine Ridge, or I never grew up around my Twiss relatives. So my mom was a larvae. And so I grew up with all of her family and then everybody who married. But then during the day, we left the res back in the relocation era. And so we moved to Denver, and we lived in the ghettos in Denver when I was little. And so that was in the early 60s, so you had the black-white race riots, and then you had the AIM stuff, and La Raza, Latino stuff. And so we were living in the hood, in the ghettos, and the projects in Denver, which was an interesting thing. And then we left there, because Mom didn't want us with the violence and the alcohol and abuse and all of that. And the long story, we ended up out in Oregon. And so I went like from grade 4 through 12 in this little all-white logging town in Oregon. And but you know, if you don't live in a border town, you live far away that don't have a big Indian community. Back then it was cool to be Indian in that situation. You know, Billy Jack came out a little while later, and so Billy Jack was like our first, butt-kicking kung fu like superhero, and he was protecting all the hippies on the commune, remember? And so it was okay to be all of that, and so then I went back to the reservation after high school, and in 72 I went to Sinteglishka, and so it was in its, I think, second year of existence at the time. And but then AIM came through town, the Trail of Broken Treaties, protest caravan. So I was like 18 at the time, I think, 18 I think. And so it sounded like a fun trip, a little adventure, go have vacation to Washington, D.C., and try to pick up white girls and stuff like that. And so went to Washington, D.C., and then the whole takeover thing happened, So there we were, the BIA building, and then sort of all hell broke loose, and they captured everybody, and then we let all the employees go, and then we barricaded ourselves in the building. So, a lot of you know the story. So for the next 8 days, we were holed up in the BIA building, surrounded by federal marshals and riot police and all of that. So me and my Rosebud homies, we were up on the roof, and so we all made weapons, and so we had spears and knives and bow and arrows and good Indian stuff. And then we had automatic weapons, and there were actually cases of dynamite, and at one point I had an egg carton. It was full of gas-filled light bulbs, and so little mini Molotov cocktails, and then we took all the typewriters and adding machines and took them up on the roof, and then when the police would come, then we would bomb them with big, heavy IBM Selectric typewriters. And some of you don't remember IBM Selectric typewriters, but as older people do, and maybe you still got some at a tribal college. Good leftover rummage sale typewriters. Give them to the Indian college. So that was sort of a backdrop for me. And then at that time, I began to really let in my own soul a hatred toward white people, a hatred toward Christianity. And so, I'm listening to all the speeches and the rhetoric, and so Means and Banks and Belcourt and Carter Camp and all those guys and the gals that are there. And made sense to me at the time. And so on the res, it was the Catholic Church who came to ran our boarding schools. You had the BIA schools and then the Catholic schools. So my grandparents went to St. Francis. Pine Ridge was Red Cloud, and then and then St. Francis and Mission, St. Francis. And so mom and dad all went, all my aunties and uncles went. And so, growing up hearing their stories of boarding school and, all those stories. And so as I was growing up, I had to go to Catholic church. And so this was now out in Oregon. So I became an altar boy, and I learned my Latin prayers. But we used to steal the wine from the back of the church and steal those little boxes of communion wafers. And so the Pentecostal charismatics talk about getting drunk in the Spirit. Well, we were doing that long before we ever started going to church. And in the Catholic Church, you have the statue of Joseph and Mary in the front, and then the candles, so you light the candle, put some money in the box, and then you make your prayer. And so we used to steal the money out of those little boxes. And if you've been into Catholic Church in a while, they put padlocks on those boxes nowadays. And so we feel like we can take some credit for changing the policies of the entire Roman Catholic Church in the United States. So, that was my experience. And then, for good Catholics, you go to confession, and I haven't been here in a long time. And you just make up a bunch of more lies and tell the priest, and then you go out and do a couple Our Fathers, Hail Marys, and then you go to communion. Then you live like hell starting Monday morning all over again. And you come back Friday night. And so it's kind of convenient, Catholicism. But at this, at a certain point, if this was Christianity, what these Christian organizations who ran the boarding schools, if that's what it meant to be a Christian, then in my own experience, I said, man, fully on Christianity. I don't want nothing to do with the white man's religion. It's oppressive. It's genocidal. It just wants to create in us this sense of shame or embarrassment for being red or being Indian or whatever. And so that was my experience for a period of time. But I wanted to know, Wakantanka, I wanted to know Tunkashila, and even in our ways, so going to the sweats and the ceremonies, it's kind of a little bit out there, like the spirits are here with us, and we have our help and our power and our medicines and all of that, but it was never this personal thing. And then when I was in AIM, the medicine man, and I won't say any of their names, but so, we'd have ceremonies and sweats and all that, and then Saturday night, in Mission, South Dakota, they come staggering out of Arlo's bar, drunk as a skunk, 2-3 women under each arm, and so all of them guys, Means, Banks, they probably got 10, 15 kids each all over the country, and the old Indian stud complex. And so I got cousins from some of those guys, So here they're the leaders, and they're drunk and just having babies like that's what they're supposed to do. And so I became sort of disillusioned with what I saw as some of their lives. They were like preaching good ideologies for the values of Lakota people, generosity and truthfulness and honesty and living in a good way, walking on the red road and abstinence and all that. But they live, not any better than any other person that I met along the way. And then the Catholic guys, my experience, they were not too kind. And so what my aunties and uncles say is the Germans who came to Rosebud Reservation and ran, those German people, they were precise and precision and engineers and exacting and sort of worldview. That was the kind of human beings they were. So that's how they did their Christianity. Sit in rows and cut your hair and just right and exact place and precision and your haircuts. And so they said they were cruel people, those German Catholics. And so it just created, all the sexual abuse and physical and violent and psychological trauma that came out of all of that. So I'm thinking, if that's sort of the net result of Christian mission, then it isn't very appealing to me at the time.